This is the story of Ann Lowe, the first Black female fashion designer, who still in 2021 is excluded from top fashion influencer lists with no Black women chosen as designers or creators because of the continuation of systemic racism in the fashion industry. Ann Lowe was the first African American to become a noted fashion designer. Lowe created one-of-a-kind high-fashion gowns and dresses for wealthy white women from the 1920s through the 1960s. Lowe was best known for designing the wedding dress for Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy. Ann Lowe was born in rural Alabama in 1898. Her great-grandmother was an enslaved woman, and her great-grandfather was an Alabama plantation owner. Her grandmother and her mother both were dressmakers. In 1914, her mother dies unexpectedly, and Lowe takes over the business and completes the gowns for the wife of the Alabama governor. In 1917, she moves to New York City to attend a segregated design school called St. Taylor, where she is forced to sit in a room alone, away from white students. In 1919, she begins designing gowns for high society white women in Florida. In 1928, she returns to New York City and opens her first dress salon, works on commission for Henry Bendel, Montados, I. Magnin, Chez Sonia, Neiman Marcus, and Saks Fifth Avenue. In 1946, she designs a dress for Olivia de Havilland, the Oscar winner for Best Actress, and then listed as dressmaker unknown. In 1950, she opens a second salon store called Ann Lowe's Gowns on Lexington Avenue in New York City with her son helping as business manager. In 1953, she is hired by the mother of Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy to design the wedding dress and all the dresses for the bridal attendants for the wedding. The family says that a, quote, Negro dressmaker made the gowns initially. All this time, wealthy white women would take advantage of Lowe's kindness and Lowe's love of dressmaking to pay less than real market value, knowing that famous designers in Paris would have charged much more for the same dresses. Many times Lowe would lose money on her designs, and eventually she lost her business to bankruptcy because white systemic racist customers continued to participate in disempowering Lowe as a Black female business owner. In 1961, she received the Courtier of the Year award. In 1968, she opened a new store, Ann Lowe Originals, on Madison Avenue in New York City. Her legacy is that she passed away in 1981, and there is a collection of 5 of her designs held at the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. 3 dresses are on display at the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and Lowe's designs were included in an exhibition on the Black fashion at the Museum of the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City in 2016. Ann Lowe's iconic garments include the wedding dress and bridal party gowns for the Kennedy wedding, and she is recognized annually in Black History Month programs for being the first Black female fashion designer in the world. Her visual aesthetics include that she is known for creating intricate hand-sewn flowers that made each dress a one-of-a-kind design. Her target customers included high society white women during the 1920s to 1960s, which also included Hollywood actress Olivia de Havilland for the 1947 win for her Oscar, which she was wearing a gown made by Ann Lowe, although the Oscar program listed the designer as unknown for the dress because of racism in the fashion industry that still exists today. Sourcing and merchandising. Lowe hired her own staff to assist in her business. Saks Fifth Avenue created an Ann Lowe salon inside their store, as seen in this orange dress label. Ann Lowe's retail formats included being hired by wealthy white women as their personal dressmaker for their families and friends in Alabama and Florida. She opened 3 independent retail salon stores in New York City, and Saks Fifth Avenue hired Lowe to have an Ann Lowe salon inside their store. Although written for young readers, this amazing book about the real life of Black fashion designer Ann Lowe represents a lasting tribute to her legacy. This book makes a great gift for anyone who loves fashion the way that Ann Lowe did, and this book honors her memory. Copyright the author. The author's name is Deborah Blumenthal, and the illustrator is Laura Freeman. When Ann Cole Lowe was a little girl, her mama and grandma taught her how to sew. When her mama died suddenly, Ann took over her job sewing party gowns. It wasn't easily, especially when she went to design school and had to work alone, segregated from the rest of the class. But the work she did set her spirit soaring, as evidenced in the clothes she made. Today, Ann Lowe is best known for designing the dress that Jacqueline Bouvier wore at her fairy tale wedding to future President John F. Kennedy. Rarely credited during her lifetime, Ann Cole Lowe was called society's best kept secret. This beautiful picture book shines the spotlight on a little-known visionary designer who persevered in times of hardship, always doing what she was passionate about, making elegant gowns for the women who loved to wear them. When she was old enough to sew, when she was old enough to thread a needle, Ann Cole Lowe's mama and grandma taught her how to sew. Wisps of cloth would fall from their work tables like confetti, and Ann would scoop them up and turn them into flowers as bright as roses in the garden. Ann's family came from Alabama. Her great-grandma had been a slave, so her family knew about working hard just to get by. Ann also knew that doing what you love could set your spirits soaring. So that's what she did, working near her mama in the family shop, making glorious dresses for women who went to fancy parties. But when Ann was 16, death stole away her mama. There was no one to care for her anymore, and no one to make the dresses. The Alabama governor's wife was waiting for her gowns. Ann thought about what she could do, not what she couldn't change. So she sat down and sewed the dresses herself, and then she stood up and ran the business. In 1916, Ann got a job sewing dresses for a woman in Florida. A year later, the woman sent her to design school in New York. Ann was a good student and a fast learner. But it was 1917, and Ann had to study in a separate classroom all alone because she was African American, and life wasn't fair. That didn't stop Ann. She kept on making extravagant gowns, and year after year, more and more women wanted to wear them. Elegant dresses, party gowns, no two alike. I feel so happy when I am making clothes that I could just jump up and down with joy, she said. Finally, Ann saved enough money to open a salon of her own in Manhattan. She had big bills to pay and sometimes not enough money to pay them. That didn't stop her. When Ann saw obstacles, she thought about what she could do, not about what she could not change. One day, Ann got a special order. A lady in Washington, D.C. was marrying a senator. 7 years later, this man, John F. Kennedy, would become President of the United States. Ann bought 50 yards of the finest ivory silk taffeta and the trimmings to go with it. For months she cut and sewed. The gown had a wide bouffant skirt with pleated bands and tiny wax flowers. Ann also made all the dresses for the wedding party. Then, just 10 days before the wedding, Ann opened the door to her workroom. No, she cried. A pipe had burst. Water gushed everywhere, flooding everything. 10 of the 16 gowns were destroyed. Ann thought about what she could do, not about what she couldn't change. She bought more fabric and trim and hired others to help. She lost money instead of earning it. In just 8 days and 8 nights, Ann and her team remade all the dresses. But when Ann brought the gowns to the mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where the wedding reception would take place, the butler who opened the door told her she'd have to go to the back entrance that was meant for workers. Ann said that if she had to enter through the back door, the bride and the bridesmaids would not be wearing her dresses for the wedding. She entered through the front door. The day of the wedding, all the world saw the future First Lady of the United States, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, in her magnificent gown and her bridesmaids' dresses in blush pink silk faille. Hardly anyone knew something more important, the name of the woman who had created all those gowns, despite the odds. Why? Because Ann Cole Lowe was African American, and life wasn't fair. That didn't stop Ann. famous woman wore her gowns at big galas and on television. I like to hear about it, said Anne, the oohs and the ahs as they come into the ballroom. Slowly, Anne got the recognition she deserved. In 1961, she was named official courtier to honor her for the 33 Cinderella gowns that she had designed for a fancy ball in Omaha, Nebraska. After so long, Anne stood up before fashion's biggest names, head held high, and they applauded her. Anne didn't make fine clothes to get rich or famous. She made them, she said, to prove that a Negro can become a major dress designer. Author's notes for the book. Ann Lowe, born in 1898, was the first African-American woman to become a designer of courtier clothing. Between the 1920s and the 1960s, her one-of-a-kind designs were worn by various society women, such as the DuPonts, the Lodges, the Post, and the Auchinclosses. Anne is now best known for the ivory silk taffeta gown that she designed for Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy's wedding to John F. Kennedy. White racism still exists in 2021. Alabama white terrorism lives on in the state where Ann Lowe sewed gowns for the governor's wife in 1914. The state just fined Montgomery, Alabama, the capital city of the state, $25,000 for their decision to remove the name of the Confederate General Jefferson Davis and replace it with a civil rights activist lawyer from the 1960s. So systemic racism in Alabama, where Ann Lowe was born, is still impacting her today.